You can see on the screen, emergency response to SLF. Jill is rewilding her yard. That's fabulous. So I'm going to put up on the agenda here so people can get a sense of what this morning will look like. We have a lot of content. We have some great presenters. So we're going to try to start on time. We're going to try to end on time as well, while also addressing as many questions as we possibly can. There's a lot of information. This isn't meant to be a full-on summit. There actually is a summit that's put on by Penn State, Northeast IPM, and others that is multiple days. This is kind of supposed to be a short and sweet overview of, one of the most invasive pests that we're going to be dealing with in New York State. So with that, as people are starting to trickle in, it is 10 a.m. You can see the agenda on the screen. I'm Hilary Mosher. I am the coordinator for the Finger Lakes PRISM. I am here at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, sitting in the Finger Lakes Institute right on Seneca Lake, which is, we're in Geneva, New York. Presenters today include Brian Eshenaur. He will be our first presenter. He's a senior extension associate with Cornell University and New York State IPM, followed by Thom Allgaier, who is the New York State Department of Ag and Markets Invasive Species Coordinator. And then Linda Svoboda, Judy Wright, and myself will follow up with kind of a response plan before we get into a detailed Q&A session where we will branch out into breakout rooms. So from there, I'm going to stop my share and let Brian take over. If we have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them appropriately.
Great, thanks, Hilary. I'm going to share now. What are you seeing right at the moment? Let's stop share.
Within your people screen. Welcome, Linda.
There we go. That looks good. All right.
Perfect.
So yeah, I'm going to go through a little bit of background, talk about the impact that this insect may potentially have in New York and what it's done in Pennsylvania and other states. So let's jump right in and take a look at this insect and where it came from and what it's like. So it is native to Asia, parts of China and Vietnam, and there it's not a problem. It lives peacefully among other plants and insects, doesn't rise to large populations. It is here, like so many invasive insects and pests of all kinds, when they're out of their natural habitat, they can become invasive, and this one certainly has. It's well suited for living here in North America. It's happy to feed on over 70 plant species here, including grapes. That's what we're really concerned about here in New York State. We're going to go into that a little bit more, but also hops, maple, apples, and even it'll feed incidentally on some of our crop hosts. But the preferred host for this insect is the tree of heaven, Ailanthus auctissima. And we'll take a look at that too. But first, let's get the big picture of where it is here in the US. And this map is one that we maintain at our IPM program, New York State IPM program. And we have been updating this regularly over the past 3 or 4 years. And it's been a slow process. Maybe every 3 months there'd be a new find or a new infestation, but it's been happening this summer, bi-weekly weekly, we've been adding new infestations, sadly. In fact, there's another county in New York, Westchester, that will be added later today. But it started right here in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and has spread since, and that was in 2014. Last year in New York State, it was only in a couple of isolated locations and has certainly spread from there. Let's take a look at the insect. So it is, somebody before we got started mentioned in the chat that, it's too bad it's invasive because it's an attractive looking insect. And it certainly is. I took this picture in Orangeburg, New York, earlier this year, this summer. And there it was on the foliage of a wild grape. And so this is what we recognize. This is what we see out there in a lot of the educational materials. But, what's this? Yeah, this is an early juvenile stage of spotted lanternfly too. Looks nothing like this, right? And then there's this stage right before it becomes an adult. It has this red color. So these easily could be viewed as three different insects, but they're the same insect, just different life stages. And here we have the life cycle. And let's start where we are right now. So we're in this stage here where the adults are out, the females are beginning to lay eggs. That starts at the end of September, and it's just started in New York in a few locations. So the eggs are being laid. And then we have December here. Normally we'll have a hard freeze and all of the adults will die sometime in December. If that happens earlier in an individual location, then that'll be it for those insects for that growing season. But the eggs can survive and do survive. In lab tests, they can survive sub-zero temperatures very well. So our winters are not going to kill the eggs. And then in May, the eggs begin to hatch, and we have these little insects that are just black and white, mostly black with some white polka dots on them. And they continue to develop, getting larger through the growing season. And then at their last life stage, as we saw in that picture, they develop this red color to them before they become an adult plant hopper. And some people have asked, well, do they go into a cocoon to transform from this to this? No, this happens inside their exoskeleton. A slit develops on the outside, and the insect crawls out, the plant hopper crawls out, and its wings expand almost like a butterfly would. And then they mate and feed extensively and begin the cycle all over again. So how do they feed? This is a spotted lanternfly flipped upside down. So we're taking a look at what really allows it to feed, and that is this really sharp proboscis. It's able to go through bark and tap into the pipework of the tree. The insect is able then to take out the sap, take out the material that it needs to gather nutrition from the sap, and then it excretes honeydew from its backside. So it has this piercing and sucking mouth part that is how this insect gets around and gains its nutrition. So this, we're going to take a closer look at this. We'll talk about grapes later on, but I did want to show this because the leaves are left alone here. It's not feeding on the leaves at all. It's not touching the grapes. This is later in the season when it moves around. It really does like grapes. And with this video, we're going to be able to see, I'm going to pull it forward here a little bit. This is the honeydew. And sometimes this is diagnostic. If we're looking for spotted lanternfly, we might see the shiny material below a tree or a grapevine, something. And can you see this? This insect is excreting, I'll go back to that because this one is so clear if you watch right here. there is the honeydew coming out. People have described it as feeling like there's a gentle rain taking place when there's a lot of the spotted lanternfly overhead. And here it is, you know, it is an attractive insect, and it's pretty, you know, it's polka dotted. How are we going to miss it? And from that picture, we're going to think, yeah, I'm going to recognize that as soon as it's in my environment. But take a look here. If we step back a little bit, can you see the spotted lanternfly there? They are on this trunk, and they are amazingly camouflaged, even though, you know, they have this bright orange underwing that is rarely shown unless they're disturbed. So they can really blend into the environment. And this was later in the season. This was in Pennsylvania where I took this photo, but earlier on and really throughout their life cycle, as long as the tree of heaven is around and it has leaves on it, you're likely to find them there, especially in a new area that has just become infested. So this is, if you're not sure, if you have spotted lanternfly in the area or you'd like to inspect, keep an eye on any tree of heaven that you know is around. So this is Ailanthus. It's also an invasive species, also from Asia. It grows really quickly. It's kind of weak wooded. It's not something that you would find in a nursery. It's not something that's deliberately planted, but like so many invasive species, it is spread throughout a good part of the United States. And this photo here shows the seed heads. The female, there are male and female Ailanthus trees, and the female have the seed heads that are visible at this time of year. The foliage is pinnate. We'll take a closer look at that. And then the bark is diagnostic for this tree. So it doesn't have a furrowed bark like the maple that's behind it. It has a relatively smooth and thin bark that can almost look, reminds me a little bit of a cantaloupe skin. And there you can see the bark in the center here. The pinnately compound leaves. Walnuts have leaves like this, but at the bottom of the leaflets, we have these little lobes, and that helps distinguish this Ailanthus or tree of heaven from other trees that might look similar. And the scent is also diagnostic. So if you're not sure and you crush up a handful of the leaves and smell those, you can pick up a distinct aroma. Some people say it smells like peanut butter. There's various ways to describe it, but really nothing else smells just like that. There are some alkaloids that are released, and we pick those up through the scent. And here are some pictures. This is earlier in the summer with a spotted lanternfly on an Ailanthus, a young Ailanthus that has sprouted up there later in the season with a female. It's about ready to lay eggs. And then at this time of year, this is actually on a maple. So late in the season, Ailanthus tends to senesce or lose its leaves early. And so then they tend to move to other species really at the end of the season. I took this picture on October 30th last year. So that was in Pennsylvania. They had not had a killing freeze at that point, and the spotted lanternfly were still out there. Females are still laying eggs. So also at the end of the season, you saw this picture before, but this is a real concern for us here in New York because of all of our wineries. They really do love to move in late in the season on grapevines. They're feeding there, and they can actually weaken the vines. Here is an image of a dead vineyard in Pennsylvania due to that spotted lanternfly feeding. So the year after there was a lot of feeding, the vines didn't come back. They didn't survive the winter. And there's one vineyard manager that lost 6 acres due to this spotted lanternfly infestation. So in New York, you know, we have a lot of wine growing regions here. We think of the Finger Lakes. There's the Hudson Valley, Long Island, some other areas throughout the state, and also the juice grape growing area for Concords along Lake Erie, and that extends into Pennsylvania. So it's a really important industry for us. This map is from the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. And just some numbers to go along with that: 470 wineries, about double that number of grape farms, 35,000 acres in vineyards. And, you know, it has a tourist impact too. You know, over 5 million visitors come to the region and visit wineries. They're buying wine, they're staying places. So it's estimated that there's a $6.6 billion direct economic impact of grapes and wineries in New York State. So big industry. We really want to be on top of this with this spotted lanternfly potentially impacting that important sector of our economy. In Pennsylvania, they look broader. They don't have quite as big a grape and wine industry there, but they were looking at all aspects of agriculture and how the spotted lanternfly might impact that. And through some faculty in the Ag Econ program at Penn State, they were looking at currently about a $50 million loss to the state, and that's equated to 484 jobs. And what is that? Because, you know, it's not grapes and wines. There are quarantine areas in Pennsylvania where there's a lot of nurseries, and those need to be inspected. And that takes a lot of manpower. It takes a lot of pesticides. It's hurting the bottom line. So these companies aren't expanding. They're maybe not hiring because it's a tough situation for them. Also, lumber in those areas needs to be inspected. The value of that goes down, the cost increases. So they're looking, if it's spread throughout the state, $324 million impact, more jobs, and the worst case scenario, if it continues to spread, you know, an annual $554 million impact. So that's Pennsylvania. A similar study has not been done in New York or other states that I'm aware of, but we can extrapolate and kind of guess what it has, or the potential that it has, I should say. And in addition to like the economic impact, there's also the impact to homeowners and recreation. This photo has been shared a lot in Pennsylvania, clustering that occurs with the spotted lanternfly. They gather together, they're feeding, and that can be a nuisance because of that honeydew and sooty mold that comes down. These stairs here have honeydew, and then honeydew is a food source. This fungus called sooty mold feeds on that. And these upper two stairs have the honeydew and sooty mold. The bottom one was washed off with a power washer. So you can see the impact. And that's slippery. That could actually be a hazard as well. So we're concerned about that in backyards and also in park situations. In addition, because of the honeydew that these insects are excreting, honeybees and yellow jackets are attracted to these other insects. And instead of going to flowers and other places that they might get nectar or their food, they're going to the spotted lanternfly and slurping up that honeydew that's coming out of this other insect. In fact, there's honey in Pennsylvania that is primarily from spotted lanternfly, and the aporists that are producing this are just going with it and labeling it spotted lanternfly honeydew. And I tried some when I was in Pennsylvania. I'd say it has an earthy flavor. Not my first choice, but it's something different. Here's a homeowner. I was talking about this a while back, and in New York, and somebody said in the audience, "Oh, I was down in Pennsylvania and my nephew had a way to deal with it, and let me send you some pictures." And so she sent me these photos. So there, can you see the clusters of spotted lanternfly up in the branches of the tree? And he's using a shop vac to get them out of their tree. I will mention that on maples and most of our landscape trees, They're not causing significant damage. Only in rare circumstances do we see any dieback on any of our landscape trees. They're a nuisance for sure, but they don't threaten the health of our trees. They threaten the health of grapes, grapevines, and also ailanthus. They are actually killing their own host plant, ailanthus. Here it is in a park setting. This one was sent to me recently from Pennsylvania. So yeah, no one wants to see that when they're out enjoying a park. And you know, the picnic tables and the benches under that have that honeydew and sooty mold. So a quality of life issue in addition to an economic issue. So just some tips about spotted lanternfly. It's really important to inspect anything coming out of an infested zone. So we have them in New York now. There's some in Pennsylvania. Some of them have official quarantines where the material being transported out commercially has to be inspected before that load leaves. And you know, if you see it, report it. I'm going to show you another slide of that in a second, but also remember that these insects don't bite or sting. You know, when they came into Pennsylvania, there was a lot of concern about that in urban areas where, you know, it's something that's really unusual in high numbers. So the movement on its own, it's reported that it can move about 3 to 4 miles a year. If it gets up into the headwinds, maybe a little bit further than that. But most movement is due because these insects are excellent hitchhikers. And this is a point to take away, that we have to watch that we're not moving this insect as we're moving around. The adults can lay egg masses on almost any surface, and they do like rusty metal, but they're really not fussy. So typically the movement is happening by human activity, whether it's on a truck or a train. They are getting around because they're hitchhiking, let's just say. So we want to check for them everywhere. As a reminder, here's where it is. This map is on the New York State IPM website. And as I mentioned, it is updated frequently. When I was traveling through Philadelphia last year, I took this picture of the car in front of me. I was in the passenger side, but I got my cell phone out, and right here, there were a lot of spotted lanternflies. It was in August, late August. There were a lot flying around, and you could see them going by. But there was one that, we were at a stoplight here, one on this car, and I was watching it, and wouldn't you know, this one, there you can see it a little bit better. Circled here, it got down into the crack between the body panel and the trunk, and you know, there would be a potential to movement. I think this one got back out, but just showing how they can get in, and there have been more than one cases where they have popped out of a trunk when somebody was loading something in there, got to where they were going, and there, wouldn't you know it, a spotted lanternfly has gotten in and taken a ride. So the adults were concerned about moving those, but really the egg masses are probably even more of a concern because they're more resilient. 48 hours after being taken off of a host plant, the adults will die under regular room temperature because they need to constantly feed. The eggs, on the other hand, can survive for months and do survive for months and can be moved around. If they're in a new location the following spring, the eggs can hatch and start a whole new infestation because you can see how many eggs, 30 to 40 eggs in an egg mass. These are the individual eggs, and they're laid in clusters and then covered with a mud-like material most of the time. Some of them occasionally are not covered, but they're covered to protect them by the female. And this looks like a lot of things in nature. It could look like a patch of lichens on a tree, so not easy to pick up. When the egg masses are first laid, it's lighter in color, but then it oxidizes and you get a darker color that we see throughout the winter. And just some examples from Pennsylvania on where the egg masses have been laid. This was, a folding chair that was actually, it was propped up for this photo, but these were laid on the underside when this was next to the ground. So they often like this post was leaning towards us here. So they're choosing to be a little bit protected on the underside, not fully exposed there. But yeah, if this chair was moved to an uninfested area, we could start a new infestation. So one thing you can do, if you do see them, scraping those egg masses is really important. Getting them into a bag that has some rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer will kill those eggs. And then, yeah, just reminding everyone to report it. We have Thom Allgaier speaking from the New York State Ag and Markets. They are handling all the reports and they're getting a lot of them. They're doing a great job screening those out and looking for it coming in from new areas. We have a link on our New York State IPM web page, the same one that has the map. You click on there, an online form pops up, and it's easy to submit your findings. Even uploading photos can be done there. So we do want to remind folks to do that. And, for additional information, Hilary and PRISM has a lot of good information. We have some information too on that same page. So become informed about spotted lanternfly. And how are we doing for time, Hilary? Should we take questions now?
Yeah, that would be great to take questions. So one of the questions is, what is the threshold for the low winter temperatures that SLF can survive?
I think in one of the studies, they went to sub-zero temperatures. So we don't think that our cold temperatures are going to kill the eggs. What will help, so we do not anticipate in the Adirondacks and in certain mountainous areas of the southern tier to have spotted lanternfly. What will help us is the shorter growing season, because it takes a long time. They don't lay their eggs until the end of September. And if the eggs don't hatch because it's cooler in the spring, they won't have enough time to actually be able to lay eggs before a frost kills them in the fall. So, there's already some frost happening up in the mountainous areas of the Adirondacks, and they don't warm up until much later in the springtime.
Great. Do we know what controls them in Asia?
Yes. So we're still learning that. Researchers in 2015 from Pennsylvania went over and to Asia, to China. There was good cooperation there, and they were looking, and they found several predator insects that feed on them. But before we bring those back and release them, we have to make sure that those insects don't also feed on other native insects. So it's a long process to develop those biocontrols. There are some biological controls that are out there, some natural fungi that are actually working in Pennsylvania. And we're seeing just some natural kill. Some research on that is taking place at Cornell in a quarantine lab. And yeah, there's some hope that, maybe we'll even be able to develop a spray with some of these natural fungi that are killing spotted lanternfly when the populations develop.
For the homeowners, should they remove their ailanthus and wild grapes?
Yeah, particularly the ailanthus, there might be some benefit to removing ailanthus, but it is not easy to do. Because if we just cut down the tree, it'll resprout from the trunk. And in a few years, you may have more ailanthus than you did starting out. So often, you could physically remove all the sprouts if you have a single tree, but often what is done is a hack and squirt method, and that is cutting into the bark of the tree and then squirting using a registered herbicide to kill that tree to make sure it doesn't resprout from the stump. But yeah, there is some evidence that you can reduce the population if you have less ailanthus in the area, because they lay more eggs, they lay their eggs sooner if they have access to Ailanthus in their life.
Do the honeydew secretions affect pollination rates for orchards or vineyards?
The honeydew is happening at a different time of year. So we're seeing most of the honeydew with the adults, and the trees pollination is happening earlier in the season. So I don't think those two would interfere with
Great.
each other.
Do you know if 7 sunflower tree is a good host?
Oh, yes. That is a fall blooming tree that's great. I'm not sure if that is one of the host species. There are some good lists out there. I'm not sure if that's one.
And only 70 other ones, right? Is it a problem for our flowers if the bees are going to that honeydew?
No. So for pollination, that the bees are distracted, they're not going to. So this is happening late in the season. I don't think it's going to be a problem for the flowers. If we were producing seeds from our flowers, then it might be an issue, but not that I know of.
Great. So it's just about 10:30. Some additional questions surround how to report them, what you do if you find them. And so I think that's a really good segue into our next presenter, who will be talking about how to report and how to really address the infestations. So with that, thank you, Brian. We will have you as part of our breakout session rooms to talk more about SLF. If you want to hold on, that'll be in just about an hour, and you can ask Brian additional questions. Now we'll turn it over to Thom Allgaier. Thom will be able to share his presentation, our New York State response to SLF. So Thom, if you want to pull up your presentation there. Wonderful.
All right, I'm assuming you can see that?
We can see it and we can hear it. Wonderful.
All right, I am going to turn off my camera if I can somehow. All right, there we go. That way I shouldn't have any audio issues. Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Brian. The 7 sunflower tree is I could not find it on a host list for a spotted lanternfly, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't migrate over to that. We don't exactly know what it will do here in the U.S. It certainly doesn't do what it does in Asia. So right now it's not known to be a host, but that is subject to change. We all have changing tastes. So I'll just jump right in. I'm Thom Allgaier. I'm the invasive species coordinator with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, and been doing these outreach type programs for several years before we had spotted lanternfly. Now that we have it, we're kind of in the thick of it. So the potential range, you can see here, the orangey kind of cyan type color is the potential range, the highest priority, highest likelihood range for spotted lanternfly. But pretty much half the United States it has potential to be range for spotted lanternfly. And you can see the areas in the Adirondacks and a little bit in the Finger Lakes region and some of the Catskills there that Brian was talking about, where the growing degree day temperatures just don't add up to enough growing degree days. If you're using a 10.4 degree brace, you need 1,495 growing degree days to reach sexual maturity. So in those slow to warm up areas of New York State, we don't reach those thresholds. So it's not likely to be present in those areas. But there's also not a lot of grape or apple production in the mountainous areas there. So unfortunately the high potential areas are the grape growing regions. Brian has already showed this map, so I'll kind of skip over real quick. He did mention Westchester will probably be added, but as you can see my list on the right, I'm assuming you can't see the strip of photos of people. You can just see the presentation screen. Is that correct? Okay. So in addition to Westchester County, we'll likely be adding, or very shortly be adding, Nassau and Suffolk County as well, due to recent fines there. All of New York City, so all 5 counties in the New York City boroughs, Tompkins County, around Ithaca, a very small population, very localized there. Orangeburg and Newburgh in Orange County as well. There's smaller areas. Richmond County, Rockland County, around Port Jervis. There's a very small area at Ulster County on the very east side of the county near Highland. It's right at the base of the walkway over the Hudson Bridge there, the walkway bridge. We recently found a population in Broome County that's been added to the map. There were several hundred there. It's a transportation corridor. I'll get into that a little bit later. Westchester, as Brian mentioned, we've had multiple locations in Westchester found throughout the county. In Nassau County, it's primarily what we found is, or when I say we, I don't just mean New York State Ag Markets, I mean the greater we. USDA, DEC, certainly the PRISMs, everyone that's been out surveying, public reports. So in Nassau County, it's primarily been found along the Nassau County Queens border and along the southern shore of Nassau County, particularly the beaches. In Suffolk County, there's a small population we've located near MacArthur Airport in Bohemia in the town of Islip, and we're currently assessing that to just see how far out that has spread. So what are the issues? I know Brian mentioned some of them earlier. I know one of the questions or one of the comments, I think it was from Jody in the chat earlier was, New York has an apple production, quite the apple production. We're second in apple production in the United States, only second to Washington State, which is also a concern. But the primary damage, as Brian mentioned, is the grapes. Sooty mold is a nuisance pest issue. You can see that photo on the right where someone had stopped cleaning their sidewalk and rode out sooty mold. It becomes a slip and fall type issue. It's an aesthetic issue. It's just a nuisance pest in those situations. It's also been seen to be feeding on raspberries and blueberries in Pennsylvania, as Brian mentioned, the other hosts of agricultural concern. So this is the reason really why New York State Ag and Markets is concerned, is the agricultural and economic value of these crops. Brian touched on honeydew and sooty mold, and he also spoke quite a bit about egg masses. You can see this car parked here on the right. Excuse me. You can see why that would be an issue. The whole top of the car is just covered in sooty mold because of the honeydew. Is a sugar-rich environment for that mold to grow. You can see many complaints, many municipalities getting many complaints about their cars being covered in this type of material. And it's not just cars; it's anything underneath. Whether it's a deck, a barbecue, kids' toys, bicycles, cars, anything underneath an area where the sooty mold, the honeydew is raining down. Egg masses, as Brian mentioned, they have an affinity for rusty metal and also protected areas. So this kind of illustrates that. The rest of the tractor trailer had no signs of egg masses, but underneath this taillight housing in a protected location, there's quite a few. The egg masses also tend to be clustered. Once one lays an egg, the others have a tendency to cluster their eggs in that location. So if you see one, kind of look around the corner, look underneath. There might be others. The undersides of fences and equipment, picnic tables, protected areas like that. The peeled back bark on trees are all, good places to find spotted lanternfly eggs. So our priority relocations are right now, as priorities change, but currently it's Broome County, Suffolk County and Tompkins County, because of the grape growing regions that are adjacent to those areas, and also because they're smaller populations and easier to manage. One of the things that Brian mentioned also is that, you know, we are in the middle of, or beginning of egg season. So they're starting to lay egg masses. In this photo here, you can see 4 egg masses. One is currently being laid. So they're almost white or very creamy color when they're first laid, and very quickly the color and texture changes. So there's quite a bit of variability in the color and texture of the covering. It goes from a white, almost glossy, to a dull matte tan brown, and it can become cracked and dried and almost putty-like, almost like mud, as time goes on. You can see the variability in, you know, in those 4 egg masses, there's about 3 different colors there. And not all the egg masses are covered. Not all of them are completely covered. Some of them are partially covered. So that again adds to some of the detection issues. But that's really what we'd be looking at now this time of year. New York State had quite the year with gypsy moth egg masses. So there's quite a few of those that look similar. The egg masses for gypsy moth look more like paper mache, and the eggs themselves are round. The spotted lanternfly eggs are, I've heard them described looking more like sesame, not sesame seeds. Caraway seeds, thank you. So kind of linear, almost with a little groove in them. So they're not round, but they're, you know, they're rice-like shaped or caraway seed shaped. In the Finger Lakes region, we've been doing quite a bit of trapping. This map is kind of zoomed out. It's hard to see all the trap locations, but we have 193 spotted lanternfly traps in the Finger Lakes region alone. You can see that one red dot there in Ithaca. That's the only positive we've had. Clustered around Binghamton, Syracuse, transportation corridors, things like that, is primarily where we concentrate our traps. And I want to thank Finger Lakes PRISM and all the prisms, but Finger Lakes PRISM has quite a few traps they've put out for us themselves in cooperation with some of the parks out there. It's greatly appreciated. We only have capacity to monitor so many traps. As far as the Conklin area, which is the Broome County find, it was found in a SLF trap. It was actually an experimental trap that the USDA designed and distributed to New York State DEC. That trap had 1 insect found. When the person went to go check the trap, they found several hundred adults. Our inspectors were alerted. We went back. We found several hundred more adults. So we suspect that this site's been there for a period of time. It's probably not from this year with a population of adults that high. At this point, I think we're up to 5 properties, both sides of the river. But you can see, you know, it's the I-81 corridor there. There's a railroad yard transportation corridor, the river, and it's in very close proximity to the Pennsylvania border. So there's some industrial sites there, some warehouses, distribution centers. There's a truck stop. All these are ideal places for spotted lanternfly to be introduced, whether it's, you know, vehicles passing through from Pennsylvania to New York, or cargo passing through from Pennsylvania to New York. As these things are unloaded and the vehicles stop, you know, it's prime location for hitchhikers to hop off and invade. As you can see here in the yellow are where we have found spotted lanternfly, so primarily on the south side of the river, but there have been trap detections on the north side of the river. We've surveyed quite a bit in the area. That survey is ongoing. Though I believe it's next week or the following week, we're having a little survey blitz. I believe there'll be 8 horticulture inspectors in that area concentrating on survey. So we're using our resources as best as we can. And the concern is that this is very close to the grape producing area in the Finger Lakes. It's one of our higher priorities. The Ithaca area, again, it's a very small area on the Cornell campus there, and it was a dead insect reported in a parking garage as well. But as the sign states, just down the road is the Finger Lakes wine country, and that's what we're trying to protect. So we have done some work, quite a bit of work with the city forester, Jean Grace, and her crew. They've been a tremendous help, as the Camp Cornell staff has been as well. So those trees, it was a weedy kind of overgrown area adjacent to a parking lot next to some student housing. So those trees were removed, the stumps were treated, and that site and the site that the chips were moved to are continually monitored by us. And then we're also looking to do, we have a contractor, we're looking to do some treatments in and around that area in Ithaca, as well as in Conklin, before the end of the season. Right now that contractor is tied up with some other contracts. As soon as he wraps up those, he should be able to carry out the contract for us, and treat those areas. We're hoping, before the adults stop flying. The other priority area is the area around Islip Airport, or MacArthur Airport in Islip. You can see this beautiful overhead shot of some of the vineyards in North Carolina, on the North Shore, North Fork of Long Island. Just to give you an idea of, you think Long Island, you think, malls and lots of population, but on the east end, there's still quite a bit of agriculture, and there's quite a bit of grape production in that area. So we're trying to protect that, and also this would be a gateway to other states, further east to Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. So we're, as we mentioned, this is another priority area. We did not expect to find it that far east this year. Potentially, they fly about approximately 4 to 6 miles on their own per year, but human-assisted movement is kind of unlimited. So we were unhappy to find it in this industrial area near the airport. It's kind of a mixed-use area. It's industrial and residential, and of course there is an airport there. There is a rail line that runs through there. There is a Sunrise Highway, which is a 4-lane highway that runs through there. So it's transportation access, and then also, the industrial component there with the warehouses. There's materials moving in and out. That's likely how it was introduced. And right now we're just trying to assess it. We're in Conklin, where we're finding hundreds of adults. In Bohemia, we're finding 10 or 12. Initially, it was one here, one there. We couldn't find any concentration of them. We continued to survey for several weeks, and we had an outreach campaign in that area. And one of the local employees of a small factory reported spotted lanternfly. We went and looked, and sure enough, we found quite a few. And again, by quite a few, I mean 10 or 12. And they were associated with some lanthus growing around the edge of the property. So what are we doing? What's being done? We've been surveying and trapping. So the traps we're using are primarily these circle traps. There's 2 versions. There's the plastic container on the right, which is a little more durable. It has a much larger capacity, and then the plastic bag type on the left there. You may see some of these in your local towns and municipalities. These are the same type of traps that I described that Finger Lakes PRISM has been putting up and monitoring for us, in addition to the ones that us and the USDA put up. Slightly different than the one that was found used in Conklin by New York State DEC. That was an experimental trap from the USDA. So, these traps are monitored on at least every 2 weeks. The insects crawl up the netting, they get funneled into a choke point, and then they can't exit. And then we go back and either empty the container or replace the bag. Excuse me, on at least an every 2 week basis. We're also conducting visual surveys. This includes warehouses, trailheads, and parking areas at recreation sites. The majority of the detections of spotted lanternfly throughout New York State have been in association with either a trailhead parking area or a recreation parking area. So vehicles are coming into these areas, parking, and then the hitchhiking spotted lanternfly are accidentally being introduced. There's also been some around truck stops and rest areas, particularly in the Hudson Valley area. As I mentioned earlier, transportation hubs and corridors, whether they're rail or road traffic or air transportation, these are all concerns because, as I mentioned, they don't spread very far on their own, but human-assisted transportation is kind of unlimited. Event locations is another thing that we're concerned with. I know there's this past weekend was Speedy Fest in the Binghamton area, which is a local chicken sandwich, for lack of a better word. Events like that, balloon festivals, race car events, concerts, any large gatherings where people come in from other areas, what can possibly bring in spotted lanternfly from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or other parts of New York at this point. These are things that we're concerned with. And our horticulture inspectors are always checking the nurseries. There's a whole list of things that we inspect for when we're out there doing our nursery and grower inspections. I want to mention the detector dogs. Lower Hudson PRISM has a team of 2 detector dogs, Dia, and I'm drawing a blank on the other dog's name, but this is Dia here on the left. I've personally met her, quite the cute dog, and very, very talented, very well trained. So the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, which is the who owns the dogs and manages them, is the host organization for Lower Hudson PRISM, and they've been beyond generous, and they have used their dogs not just in the Lower Hudson PRISM, but throughout New York State. You can see there on the right, early on, we were doing some regulatory checkpoints of vehicles coming in from other states into New York, and there you can see Dia kind of sniffing around that tire. The dogs had detected insects on trucks that, thankfully, they were dead insects, but they were spotted lanternfly that were on trucks that our horticulture inspectors did miss. And here you can see Dia on the left honing in on the railroad track there. The underside of that track is a photo. There's a single egg mass right about where she is there. And on the underside of the track, which would be very difficult for humans to inspect, especially for any length of track, where the dog can do it much more efficiently than we can. So that's been a huge help, is these detector dog programs. I know the state of Pennsylvania has been touting their dogs and stating that they're the first dog teams, but really the Lower Hudson, the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, detector dogs for spotted lanternfly were really the first trained and used in the field for these things. And it's been, it's just another tool. It's not a perfect tool, but it's another tool in the toolbox that we can use to monitor and slow the spread of spotted lanternfly. Outreach is another huge component of what we've been doing. I'm sure you're all familiar now after joining this. You can see that wanted poster there on the left that Hilary and the Lakes PRISM has put together, which I think is a great marketing tool. Really catches your eye. I think it's done really well. We've been using some of that ourselves. And then we've also had various spotted lanternfly literature and kind of swag. A lot of that's given out during the state fair. The wine coasters, there's several trifold brochures, there's some pest alerts that Cornell Cooperative Extension has put together, and then temporary tattoos for the kids, which don't really have a lot of information, but it gets people talking, as do the hats. And I'm also often, I don't have the camera on, I'm often complimented on my hat and asked about the butterfly on my hat, and it starts a good conversation about, well, it's not actually a butterfly. It's a plant hopper, and if you see this, please stomp it. So these outreach campaigns, just like this outreach event that we're holding today, is extremely important because we can only be in so many places at so many times. Where the general public, the more we get this message out there, and we get these reports of spotted lanternfly sightings, and that's the best way we can react. Is the sooner it's found. Conklin is a good example where it had sat kind of unnoticed for a little while, as opposed to Bohemia, where there's a much smaller population. The quicker we can react, the better chance we have of slowing this down. What else is being done? There's been some treatments. As I mentioned earlier, we have a contractor that we're working with for Ithaca and Conklin. Lower Hudson PRISM had a PRISM partner that volunteered their time. They're a certified applicator. They volunteered at least 2 days of their time at this point, and they've done treatments. And you can see the results of the treatments there on the left. The base of that Elaphis, that tree of heaven there, is littered with dead spotted lanternfly, and that will persist for weeks. So as much as we can squish, 1, 10, 20, these insecticide treatments last, 24 hours a day and last for weeks and weeks, and they're much more effective. So we're working with partners like Lower Hudson PRISM, and also the town of Lloyd was instrumental in that treatment, in getting those treatments done. Also, the property owners just giving us permission to do so, whether they're municipal properties or private properties. So the contractors and the partners in some of these treatments have been instrumental in getting some of these initial treatments conducted and site preparations. You can see the base of this Elaphis tree is kind of cleared. It was relatively cleared not too earlier, just so the contractor can make access to the base of the tree for the basal bark sprays. So site preparation on some of these sites is key, that the treatments don't take longer. There's a very small window, and we want to make the best use of the time of those contractors. So site preparation, clearing the brush from around the base of the trees, things like that, getting permission to access the trees is key. Especially for some of the municipalities, it can be a lengthy process to get permission to access some of the trees. Here's Brian's favorite photo again of that chair. One of the things that we've asked people to do is to be mindful when you're moving things, whether it's a hunting tree stand this time of year or some camping equipment like this chair, or even a camper, firewood, construction equipment, construction materials, anything that's been exposed to an area known to have spotted lanternfly potentially has eggs, or adults, depending on the time of year. So the adults can actually hop in vehicles or on people and into vehicles on the exterior of vehicles, like Brian illustrated really well earlier. So what you can do is do a thorough inspection. Part of that is a permitting program. I'll get into that in a minute as I wrap up. Indicators of spotted lanternfly, I know Brian covered this pretty well, but if you're going to survey, these are good things to hone in on. Young Elaphis trees, sooty mold, honeydew. If you see these things, take a second look for spotted lanternfly. You'll also see this the fungal blooms at the base of the tree. As I mentioned earlier, the sooty mold on the sidewalks where it's a slipping hazard. Congregations of stinging insects, particularly yellow jackets like the one bottom here. You'll smell a slightly like a fermentation smell, especially when they're heavy infested trees. And this time of year, you'll get that sweet fermentation smell, and that's what's attracting the stinging insects. So these are all indicators that spotted lanternfly might be present in the area. So one of the things you can do is, especially if you're a business or a municipality that's working in areas of Pennsylvania or New Jersey or others, is to get go through the free training. It's like a 2-hour course. It's completely free, and basically it trains you how to do an inspection, and the permit allows you to do those inspections, those pre-trip inspections, and it goes into great detail on how you can prevent accidental hitchhikers. And the hitchhikers I'm talking about are like this adult. I know Brian mentioned that earlier, and the eggs that I mentioned earlier. So any equipment that's been sitting for a while, or any any equipment or vehicles that have been exposed to, the adults and even the nymphs are really good hitchhikers. So at pretty much all life stages, spotted lanternfly is a great hitchhiker. You can report, as Brian mentioned earlier, to New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, to our reporting tool. That's really the best way to do it. Those can be directed to our folks, and we can respond to those pretty quickly. Another option is the New York State Invasive Species Database, which is iMapInvasives. So insects can be reported in there as well. In both cases, it's extremely important to include photos. As I mentioned, IMAP, there's the 4th installment coming up on October 27th of the Claim a Grid program. So you can actually claim a grid to survey multiple times a year, and negative survey is good. So just because you looked for it and didn't find it doesn't mean you didn't do anything positive. We know that area has been checked, and we don't have to direct resources to recheck it. If you claim a grid, we ask that it's checked at least a couple times, 2 or 3 times within a year. Not 3 days apart, but throughout the season, when there'd be different life stages and different habits of spotted lanternfly as they kind of migrate through the environment. And you can claim a grid and continue to survey, and that would be a huge help for us. For additional information, as Brian mentioned earlier, is the Cornell IPM site. It's a wealth of information. Our Agriculture and Markets website also has information on spotted lanternfly. It's not updated as frequently as the Cornell site, but both are great resources there for spotted lanternfly in New York. And I'm available as a resource as well. You can always shoot me an email, ask me a question.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate
Thom.
everybody's time.
Yeah, there's been a flurry of questions, and a bunch of people have been able to interject and answer these questions. I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Linda Rolleder. She is the director for the New York, New Jersey Trails PRISM Conference. She's the coordinator for the Lower Hudson PRISM. So she is the one that facilitated the initial conservation dog program and has been running it ever since its inception. So she has put her email in the chat box, and she will be participating at the end of this program in one of the breakout sessions. So if you have questions specific to either the conservation dogs or what's happening in the downstate area, because Thom had mentioned that we do have a lot of catches there. So you can talk to her about what the PRISM down there is doing to facilitate SLF treatment in those areas. So now we're going to move into, stay on target here. We're going to move into our Finger Lakes response here. And I was telling Brian a little bit that, typically I like to make my presentations very picture heavy, but unfortunately with response plans, you're stuck with words, and I apologize for that. So you're seeing my screen?
Yes.
Beautiful. So just to give an overview, there's 8 regional partnerships within New York State. We have a lot of people from out of state and actually in Canada who are participating on this slide webinar. So I wanted to provide the information about who we are, what the PRISMs are. You can see here, if you can see my cursor, this is the Finger Lakes region. We have over 1/3 of the wineries out of all of the state. So as I mentioned before, it's a very high priority given the fact that SLF loves grapes, and we are a great producer for either wine or grape juice. Linda is down here in this Lower Hudson region where, if you saw the map previously, it was all red. There's a lot of counties that have SLF. So PRISMs, we actually address the threat of invasive species through multi-tiered approaches. So while we do prevention and communication, we also enlist in survey and mapping. We do early detection, rapid response. We do a lot of control projects, whether it's a strike team like Linda has, or we have subcontracts like the Finger Lakes PRISM has. We also have recruitment and training of volunteers. So we have a ton of volunteer programs. In our region, we have a macrophyte survey and a trail survey, which we're trying to enlist more participants to look for SLF. It's a collaborative effort, and I want to make that clear that we don't work in a vacuum. that partnership is in our name. And so we really try to emphasize working with a variety of stakeholders. And our funding is through the Environmental Protection Fund, which is administered through contract with New York State DEC. So we need to provide a framework for the Finger Lakes, the infestations here. And so we got together and discussed a framework that is really adapted from the New York State DEC's Rapid Response for Invasive Species framework. And so the framework has to include these aspects of prevention, early detection and reporting, rapid assessment, planning, rapid response to that, and then reevaluating your response. But these responses must be tiered. And so we know that we can't use some of these aspects when we have a large infestation, and we need to take a different approach when we're in the pre-infestation phase. So our responses must be tiered and must be adapted for sometimes by county, hopefully by region. So we know in the Finger Lakes, we have 17 counties. We have 2 counties that are high priorities for Department of Ag and Markets. We're going to treat those counties a little bit differently than the other counties who are bordering or even in other areas. So I can get my thing to click over here. Some of the activities that we use for the different prevention, we use outreach. So we're doing workshops, we're doing trainings. We had over 375 people sign up for this webinar today, which shows that people are very interested. They want to know more. So here we are trying to provide this information where it can be useful. There's traps used for prevention, for detection. Now, Ag and Markets is the lead agency responding to SLF, so all reporting goes to them. But we are putting out traps hoping that we can supplement the work that they have. They have 193 traps in the area. We have 143. So in combination with those traps, we're hoping that if SLF is there, that we can find it. And then that rapid assessment, which Ag and Markets is taking the lead on, delineation, determining the extent of the infestation, and then trying to create that plan of attack. What are we going to do? What's the messaging? What's the survey design? Are we going to get permissions to put traps on people's properties and then getting permissions to do the survey as well as the management? It's not just find the SLF, take down the tree, and there we go. A lot of people don't want government agencies, state agencies to be on their property. So it is a very delicate thing to have, go up to someone and ask for permission to either survey on their property or manage invasive species on their property. That rapid response, which obviously are traps, and managing vegetation, which Linda Rolleder can discuss more in a breakout session because she's in the thick of it, and then reevaluating and adapting as needed. So here in the Finger Lakes here, most of our counties are in this pre-infestation where prevention is really critical. We need to have traps in high-risk areas utilized as a detection tool. We need to communicate the risk to the community in reaching out. So ironically, Broome County, the director of Broome County Parks, reached out this past spring. She had a cooperative agreement with Binghamton University for invasive species interns. We got a group together. We're able to do some training on invasive species work. And it was so fortuitous because when we were speaking, I said, Broome County is going to get hit next. It is the closest of our counties to Pennsylvania. It's on a major transportation route. I need to get you traps. We need to beef up our SLF response. So she has 7 traps throughout the Broome County parks and in city park areas, and more traps are on the way. We've been giving her SLF materials for all of her outreach programs that she has. Broome County Parks, I saw the numbers this past summer. They have over 1 million visitors each summer, just in the summer alone. And Speedies Fest that Thom was talking about, 100,000 people will be there over Friday, Saturday, Sunday of this coming week for a Columbus Day weekend. Finger Lakes PRISM will be having people there as well to supplement the CCE work, the parks work. So really tabling and providing that information is super important. I also worked with the Broome County Parks Director on a grant with the Upper Susquehanna Conservation Alliance. We were able to secure a small grant to provide funding for invasive species survey. So some of that work is being done right now, but the majority will be done in next year. So, you know, we're really trying to take a proactive approach, not thinking that we would actually need it this year, but there we are. Survey and reporting is super important. We have a project, Dr. Katie Amatangelo at SUNY Brockport has some funding from us to set up over 33, she's got 33 traps throughout the region, in state parks and in Monroe County, looking for SLF. They have to be monitored every 2 weeks. She has, this is a picture of one of her traps here with the signage that goes along with it. So it's really important for us to utilize this network of volunteers and professionals to do trapping and surveying in high risk locations. We also need to target audiences with a communications plan. Also super important, because most people aren't going to start calling you until they see a large population. And at some point, that's not, you know, we're not going to be able to address that. So this would be, you know, a response for a small infestation. You know, when we first heard about it, we kind of looked like this little raccoon up here in the upper right, just, what are we going to do now? So Ag and Markets came through with the lead. They're delineating the population. Thom called at one point and said that they're using a shop vac to vacuum some of the adults off of trees, which was very disheartening. But it's necessary. We need to delineate. We need to figure out what it is we're dealing with, and then we need to communicate with others. Ag and Markets is determining the steps to control the population, and we're looking to communicate with audiences, set up additional traps if we need to. Right here is a tabling that Broome County CCE will be doing at Speedies Fest, but also has been doing this whole summer with information to the community about spotted lanternfly. They really are on the ground boots for outreach to the community. We need support from municipal officials. So our parks people, our planning departments, our Cornell Cooperative Extension. Someone indicated, you know, is DOT taking care of Tree of Heaven along the right of ways? No, that's not one of their priority species that they address, but maybe now with the SLF critical need, it's possible that they could change their protocols and start addressing Tree of Heaven. You know, that's something that we'll work with them on, but really hitting this communication hard in these areas, utilizing an established communication plan, which includes tools like press releases, social media, listservs. So CCE has their master gardeners list. We have a master naturalists. We have the Finger Lakes Institute list. Utilizing all of these lists, New York IPM, etc., we're able to get the information out to people in need. Not including the municipal reps and the folks that need to be briefed, which is done either by CCE or IPM or Ag and Markets. So in the thick of it, you know, this is Linda's show right here. I should just let her take over because I feel like she's got a lot going on. These are pictures that I took of spotted lanternfly when I was in Philadelphia a year ago, summer, and I was just on vacation with my family, and I look over and see the spotted lanternfly. I look back, no big deal, and then I looked because I wasn't expecting to see it, and there it was right in front of us. So, you know, it is there. It is cryptic. You think that it's so easily identifiable with its spotted wings, but as Brian and Thom both showed, it gets on a tree. It's very hard to identify if you're not keyed in on it. And so that's one of the things, getting people to key in on looking for this bug is huge. And so when you have a high infestation, and again, I'm gonna leverage Linda if she wants to jump in, but there's a lot more calls from the public because there are a lot of reports. And so even Ag and Markets has put on their website, we don't need any more reports from the city. We know it's there. We don't, you know, we want to know if in new locations. So communication and prevention efforts still need to continue. It's not done, because your control efforts need to be communicated the communities and stakeholders need to know that you are doing something, and they need to be trusting that you are trying to address this infestation adequately. Downstate is doing vegetation management. So from a previous presentation, I learned that the Lower Hudson is removing all plants, or trying to remove many plants that SLF feeds on in areas that aren't able to be fitted with a trap. And you can also remove appropriately. Again, you have to follow guidelines for Tree of Heaven. Otherwise, you're basically exponentially growing your population in the future. But then a key here is when you cut the vegetation on site, don't move it off site. Leave it there because it might be hiding spotted lanternfly, and you would be bringing spotted lanternfly from one area to another. So traps are used for a variety of reasons. In the downstate area, they're using traps as control. They're getting hundreds of SLF in their traps daily, where we would be using them for detection, for an early detection, rapid response. They're using it as a control to reduce the spread to other areas. So what is going on? It's hard to know what others are doing, but know that there are many people, many groups working in tandem that are addressing the threat of spotted lanternfly and engaging different targeted audiences. So for example, Brian in the New York IPM is facilitating a state outreach working group. So there are, almost, I would say 75 people on these calls getting as much information about spotted lanternfly that we can then disseminate to our stakeholders. Then there's the Northeast IPM, who's convening a subgroup of that working group to create that communications plan for those of us who are in the thick of spotted lanternfly. We already talked about ag and markets, how they're surveying, delineating, planning their control, and getting landowner permissions. Cornell Cooperative Extension, who I would like to shout out to Linda Svoboda and Judy Wright, who are also participating in this webinar. They're the connection to the municipal officials. They're providing on-the-ground support. You saw the tabling that I showed in a previous slide. They're there to answer the questions at these large events, and even people calling into their office. Most people know their regional CCE and use them as a resource. And so they know the most about SLF and provide the information to their stakeholders. They also have a ton of listservs. Just listed there is the Master Gardener list, the Naturalists, the watershed groups. So there's a ton of ways that they can get that information out. New York State IPM, you saw Brian is updating those maps and keeping these resources, these necessary resources up to date. Other websites in other states are using New York State IPM's maps in their websites and in their presentations because it is such a valuable resource. The New York State Grape Teams, the viticulture specialist extensions, Hans Walter Peterson will be on after the Q&A session to talk to the wineries, the vineyards, the distilleries, the commodity groups, because he's the liaison for resources and information to the growers. So if people have questions, he's going to facilitate getting traps at some of these high-risk locations and vineyards. So really utilizing these groups that, unless it's listed on paper, you might not think all of these things are being done, but New York State's response to SLF is phenomenal. And we are, trying to stay ahead of the curve. So from our point of view, the PRISMs, I know that the Finger Lakes, we do prevention via outreach and tabling. We'll be at the Speedies Fest this weekend. We've been at multiple programs as much as COVID allows. We have our watercraft stewards. They hand out materials for SLF. We also have billboards. We have stickers. We have a ton of materials that we're trying to get in the hands of people so that they can identify this bug. We have early detection through surveys and traps across stakeholder groups, and then resource dissemination. I will say that iMapInvasives, Thom talked a little bit about the grid survey. I do have several slides that iMapInvasives provided to me to introduce you to that program, and hopefully you can sign up. So here is a map of the Finger Lakes PRISM traps that we have in the area and who who is running those traps. And I would like to have a shout out to Steve Bronca. He is managing 3 traps, 2 in Sampson State Park and 1 in a residential area on Seneca Lake. But again, we have a ton, and these are just traps. These have not been positive. None of our traps have positive reports, but we're trying to hit high priority areas where a lot of people frequent. So you can see there's Teganic Falls down here in Ithaca, Watkins Glen, which is one of the highly frequented parks in New York State. Letchworth State Park has several. That is also another highly frequented park in New York State. So really trying to strategically put traps in these areas. And you already saw that Ag and Markets, USDA PPQ have additional traps in the area. I have this on a Google map. So if you're interested in looking at specifically where these traps are, I'm happy to share those locations. And then you can see down here, we have all the traps from Broome County Parks. We need additional people to have traps in the area. So I'll get to that in another slide. But if you can monitor a trap every 2 weeks from the time the nymphs come out until the first hard frost, that would go such a long way in this early detection and prevention aspect of SLF. We're also utilizing this marketing campaign. We have to capture the attention of everyone. We can't just speak to us. We know a spotted lanternfly. We need to speak to everyone in our region. And so how do we do that? We need to capture their attention. And so we had a marketing firm, Kleehammer Designs, create this poster. They also fitted it to a magnet, which some of you may have. This is a postcard that Ag and Markets will be paying for, but we'll be mailing out. And the intent of these postcards is to have a location where there's an infestation and then pick, a mile radius or, a location around that find where we can mail homeowners information about spotted lanternfly so that they can be on the lookout for it and know where to report. We also have a program where we're trying to get wineries, and this could be breweries, this could be bottles, these could be any bottles, where these are wine tags. And so it fits over a wine bottle. And so people who are buying these products can go home with information. We worked with the Cuba Lake Wine Trail, the president of that program, on what sort of advertising would work best. And we came up with these wine tags. So we're really looking forward to these. We have door tags as well. And then this is a marketing campaign that's on social media. Now there's multiple tiers of these plans of attack. And so we have to recognize that these aren't free and we're not doing it. So who do you want to reach? Depends on how much money you have and whether or not you can do it yourself. So we started out with the poster, wine tags, door hangers, and magnets. And you can see here, we're going to get a good reach, but that's a lot of time and investment on our end to mail out these kits to people. We have to take multiple seasonal staff members and full-time staff members to go door to door to have these door hangers put out. Whereas the direct marketing includes postcards, you're going to get a bigger reach there. There's less office time for us to do that, but there's a bigger reach throughout. And then a fully integrated campaign, which this marketing firm would love to, is doing for us. Obviously it costs more, but the reach is far greater. And that would include animated videos, social media advertising, as well as these other plans of attack. So I'll just show you that we use this direct marketing in the past for hydrilla. We had some EPA funds. So we utilized this campaign from September 4th through the end of October. It cost about $4,800. And it was almost 1 million impressions, almost 500,000 people reached, and the number of click-throughs is phenomenal. So people saw this on social media. This is a video that they created on the harm of hydrilla, which is available on the Finger Lakes Invasives website. And maybe Matt, you can post the link to the video. But it really increased that impression, right? Increase the awareness so that people can start looking and knowing what hydrilla is so they can report. And I just wanted to give a plug because this is the person that did it. And since we're going through of all the things that people are doing in the area, this is Larry Kleehammer is the president. So reach out to him if you have any questions on this campaign or the numbers that they had. He'd be happy to work through. His designer actually created this little caricature and then ended up going to Hershey and saw spotted lanternfly everywhere. So I was thinking he might be able to write off that trip because it was a work trip. So moving on to iMapInvasives. So iMapInvasives really is looking for people to help monitor for SLF. We can't possibly reach all the area in New York State, and we know this bugger is really, really cryptic. And so iMap asks people to find a location. It could be a grid square that's right next to you. And you really just want to check for a tree of heaven and then spotted lanternfly on that tree of heaven a couple of times throughout the year. And then you report the presence or not presence or not detected records to iMap. So here is a claiming a grid square. If you go to newyorkiMapInvasives.org/SLF, it's a 1 kilometer grid square across the state. So let's see here if I can get. There's been a lot of people who have participated so far, and really this has only been a couple, several months in the making. There is another webinar coming up, as Tom had indicated, at the end of October. But you can see here that there are a lot of surveys being conducted here in the Finger Lakes. Obviously, Lower Hudson has a ton of surveys as well. But so far we have over 320 grid squares claimed and over 1,900 records. So that is really great. Obviously, we have more not detected SLF than present, and to my knowledge, we've not had anyone in iMap report in the Finger Lakes that was a population that was unknown. And here we go. So in the Finger Lakes region itself, we have 52 claimed grid squares, but we have over 900 unclaimed. And so if you could take a kilometer and just monitor that kilometer for the next couple of months, that would really greatly help us out. We have 131 SLF surveys, so mostly non-detected. And again, I don't think that anyone has found an SLF that was not already known. And there's been almost 250 tree of heaven surveys, so mostly present, which we need that information. If we don't know where tree of heaven is, we can't put a trap. And if we can't put a trap, we can't monitor. And so understanding the dominance or the density of tree of heaven throughout an area is highly valuable. So here's more information. They have a webinar on October 27th. It provides this step-by-step guidance on participation and provides resources on spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven, as well as how to use iMapInvasives if you're unfamiliar. So what are we going to be doing next? In the Finger Lakes region, we're going to be setting up additional traps, but we need buy-in. We need our vineyards, we need our breweries, we need our businesses, we need our companies, we need our factories, we need everyone that is bringing people from Pennsylvania or even downstate to potentially put out a trap. We're willing to talk and figure out how to get traps in these areas, tell you how to monitor them, and go from there. We're looking to create these localized work teams for a rapid response when necessary, utilizing and leveraging that communication plan, which will show the designated workflow. In addition, additional survey for tree of heaven using the grid square issues. In previous talks, we talked about if you can move tree of heaven, do it if you have the capacity to do it correctly. If you do it incorrectly, it's actually not worth it. So only if you know what you're doing or get an arborist to come in and remove tree of heaven. And then this communication plan, which includes a ton of information, newspaper, media. We have to get this right. We have to get people to know, observe, and report. And if they can't report, then it's useless. because, you know, we know from previous invasive species that people are able to get this information, but if they're not able to make that little extra effort to report something, then we need to find that way to make it easy for them. So hopefully with all the different outreach materials we have, again, we have the door tags, we have K through 12 outreach materials, you know, we have a 3D model and really great educational tools. But if people can't report, then we're lost. So trying to get everyone on board to put out traps, check traps, and report invasive species as they see them. So I think hopefully the past hour and a half gives you a little background on how we're all working together to stop SLF. And I know that a bunch of questions were in the chat box. I don't know, Matt, if we want to address them now or just go right into the breakout sessions, we can do that.
There were only a few other questions that weren't immediately addressed in the chat. If you just want to answer those really quick.
Okay. Can you just read them off because I...
Yep. So there were a couple questions on how people can reach out if they were interested in volunteering to monitor and set up traps on their own.
Yeah. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and we can add you to a group, an SLF group. We are, you know, Matt Gallo is our terrestrial outreach coordinator who's speaking right now. He was managing the trail survey. And so we've kind of been recruiting people who participated in that survey to work on SLF monitoring. So, you know, it's a natural progression from that program to another program. So reach out to me. I'll put Matt's email address here as well, and we'll get you hooked up.
I would just jump in with one thing to mention that because we have people from all over on the call. If you're not from Finger Lakes PRISM, you know, there are 8 prisms throughout, 8 PRISM regions throughout New York State. Each PRISM has, you know, a need for volunteers, but certainly the bulk of the people on the call are probably from the Finger Lakes region, and Hilary would be the person to reach out to. But there are 7 others if you live in a different region.
Great, Tom. Yes, thank you. I will post the PRISM directory in just a second.
Our next question here is, does the species have any preference for elevation? So an example would be a hilltop or a valley.
I want to pitch that one right to Brian.
Yeah, so not particularly. It does like to crawl up on telephone poles, tall trees, and that's how it launches itself when it flies. It's not a particularly strong flyer, so it kind of climbs up and glides for a little bit, and you know, it does move its wings, but in that way there's an elevation effect. There could be an elevation effect where a higher point in the landscape might be a little colder, and so it might be less fit there, but you know, I think that kind of covers it, and it would depend on, you know, where we're talking about and how high the elevations are.
Great.
Our next question is, are the biological products as effective as synthetic insecticides?
I would say right now, probably not. There are studies that are going on to make these as efficient as possible and you know, killing as many insects as possible, but they're not even commercially available yet. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And the last unanswered question we have from the chat is, do 911 call centers know how to direct SLF calls?
I got to say that this is something that happened in Philadelphia. That sometimes I talk about this. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran a headline story, "Please don't call 911 about spider lanternfly." People were doing this, and it clogs it up. You can imagine for some true medical emergencies, you want those lines to be as clear as possible. But yeah, people do call. I am not sure what the emergency responders do for that. They may encourage them to call 311, which I believe In Pennsylvania at the time, they did have places to refer people to. I don't know if anyone else has an answer for that, Hilary, and what we're doing in New York State.
Yeah, I think Linda would probably be the one with more information about that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think at this point, let's go into breakout rooms, see if you have specific questions. I'm going to open all the rooms. You can choose a room that you would like to go in and have some questions with our facilitators, and then you can move between rooms. So that hopefully is a benefit to you all. So I'm going to open the rooms now. You can choose one of 5 breakout rooms, and hopefully our facilitators will also pick the right breakout room as well. Hopefully this will be of super value for you all to get additional questions answered about SLF. This recording will, this is being recorded. It will be available on the FingerLakesInvasives.org website. Once it's available, for everyone that registered through Constant Contact, I have all your emails, so I will send the recording to you on that, based on that, your emails there. Okay. Let's see, we've got some people joining rooms. Great. Great. Oh, gosh. Looks like
Hilary, if you can, I'm trying to click on mine to get into that one.
Sure, I got you.
Thank you.
Should be joined. Okay. So I would suggest you just pick a room because, and if you don't, just maybe do the general SLF because no one is going to monitor the main room. Great. So the rest of you, there should be 5 breakout rooms showing if you're on your computer. So one of them is the general SLF questions with Brian Eshenaur. One is current infestations, response, control, and effectiveness. That is with Thom Allgaier and Linda Rohleder. Mapping and survey with the IMAP team, Mitch O'Neill and John Marino. Then we have wineries, breweries, commodity impacts with Hans Walter Peterson. And then a Finger Lakes response framework with myself, Linda, and Judy Wright. So I'm going to go into that room. Feel free to join a breakout session.
Free to join us there. And here she
Sure.
is. So if people want to request traps, Hilary.
Yes, so email me your location and how many traps that you need. So right now we have a critical need to get traps out for the interim until the first frost. So if we don't get it within the next month, then we should wait until spring when the nymphs are out, because having them over the winter time is not, there's just no value there. You'll also get a lot of bycatch. And someone had talked about someone had asked a question about bycatch. The SUNY Brockport traps, they're putting up 33. 2 of the traps in Mendon Ponds, ironically, have been catching frogs. So that's one, yeah, little tree frogs that are climbing up. But those are the only traps that are catching anything, any vertebrate. The rest of the bycatch is some bugs and that sort of thing. They did make a case that there was some spider web action happening. I guess they're using the ones with the bag, and so the spider webs they're setting up shop right at the mouth of where
Oh man, very clever.
Right? That's like perfect. There we are.
I hadn't even considered tree frogs.
I'm assuming that if you get the traps, there are instructions in terms of what size tree you put them on, what type of tree you put them on, how close together they are.
The traps are terrible directions. But there is a lot of information about like size of trees that we can get you from external sources.
Okay.
Penn State has a lot of information about circle traps.
Yes.
And even how to make your own.
Okay.
Cool. Hilary, I wanted to ask, so we've got a network of about 20 community gardens with 500 households gardening with us.
Oh, great.
I'm wondering, like, if I sent you a map of where our gardens are, you could kind of strategically decide where you might want to trap.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was asking is, I think it's really great that you guys have posters in Spanish and French. That's super helpful. At least for us, whenever you can get to it, Arabic and Mandarin would be helpful for the households we work with.
Okay. So Mandarin and Arabic.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just haven't had the capacity to.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So
I mean, we run a New American Gardeners program. I don't know if you want them to try and translate the English to their native language and then promote that, or if you'd rather have professionals do it.
I think at this point we need it done. So I don't know if we have money in the budget to pay for the translation over other stuff. So it's one of those prioritization, aspects. So if we get it done for free, that would be better.
Okay.
Excuse me for a second. I just have to jump out to a different room. So maybe Judy and Linda can ask questions or answer questions for a second.
Sure.
So
on how to volunteer and how to participate, and it kind of walks through all of those steps.
And this is where you can sign up.
Are you guys having difficulty finding a room? Okay. If you send me a chat, I can put you in a room.
And so we set that up and we had that meeting. It was not well attended, but they were also invited to this meeting. Just let them know what the situation was and what was happening. Right. And now we'll move on to a more broader outreach with the communities and make sure lots of eyeballs are out there looking for this.
And Linda, you're going out this week to survey with
tomorrow
them?
to
Tomorrow.
the site.
Okay. It'd be great if you could get some pictures and connect with me after to let me know what your situation is. Yeah.
Yep, and I'm kind of finding out about it, you know, as you all are. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I guess that's a good point, is that this changes. I didn't even mention in the broader presentation, I was reviewing the SLF Summit from Penn State. Does a summit, a 3-day summit every year. In that summit, Brian and Ethan Angel from Ag and Markets were discussing SLF in New York State. And as of March, there were 2 known infestations, 2, Staten Island and Tompkins County. So you can see that this summer, the door blew wide open on this infestation. And so we have a chance now to get ahead of that with knowing how quickly I mean, obviously the populations were there. So there's no way that they just randomly had eggs,
Right.
you know. So getting people to be aware of what it is they need to look for, how they need to look for it, and what they need to do to be prepared in terms of egg scraping, reporting. There's so many reports of people not being able to report. So many reports of people not being able. So falling down in that reporting capacity. So you see the bug, and a lot of people, oh, I saw that, or I know what that looks like, but either they didn't know who to contact, didn't know it was important enough to contact them, or actually got so far as to take the picture and then something happened where the picture was deleted and couldn't report it.
Yeah, lots of people saying, yeah, I've seen that, but I didn't know it was a problem. So I didn't know it was not supposed to be here. Yeah, things like that. So.
I mean, like, I wonder if there's a way to offer, I mean, you don't want perverse incentives, but some kind of way to incentivize people to report, you know, say like, oh, if you get a positive ID in one of these high needs regions, you get, you know, free ticket to Speedy Fest or something like that, you know.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of benefits to doing something like that. I was thinking of maybe incentivizing people to put up traps, because everyone in this room could try, you know, want to put up a trap, but there are hundreds more people that need it. You know, it's the others it's the people that are not at the table that need to be brought. How do we bring them to the table? Debbie, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks. I'm Debbie Lyon from the Finger Lakes Museum. And I work pretty close to the Keuka Lake State Park. And I'm wondering, I heard somebody mention, and I'm sorry, I'm getting all these organizations confused about who is in charge of what. If there were a need for a trap to be set there or to be monitored, how would I get on that list of people to be contacted for that, or something else in that area?
Yeah, so we do have CCE Yates has one at Keuka Lake State Park and the Keuka Outlet Trail, at the boat launch, and you know, but more traps, the better, I think.
Yeah, the traps in really visible areas. So all the parks, we'll take one here. We'll put it in Cutler Garden. You know, even if it's not a likely spot to find spotted lanternfly, if it's highly visible, you know, you're getting the message out.
And so who would I contact? Should I contact someone at CCE Yates? I know a couple of people there. Who would be my point of contact for that?
Contact me. So CCE Yates got their traps from me. I have to see if I can get more for this season because I'm out of them. But if we can get a rush order and get some out within the next month to capture adults, that would be great. Otherwise, we're going to capture names. We're going to ramp up this campaign and enrollment and start solid come April and really knock it out of the park with the amount of traps we have in the region. Okay,
so maybe I have some of those little, they look like credit cards with the spotted lanternfly info on it. If I got a small group of people together sort of informally to go for a hike and we had those along with us, we could maybe, that would be maybe a way of starting that effort.
Certainly bringing awareness of the issue And so the scraper cards are for eggs. And at this point, you don't have eggs. They might, you know, is the messaging clear and concise about what it is you're looking for and what to do with them? You know, knowing that now is the adult phase. And if you find adults, it's likely you'll find eggs.
Well, the cards have all the pictures on them.
Yeah.
So we would just have to know which picture to be looking for, right?
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask? Oh, sorry. When we registered, we requested like 50 posters. Do you know how quickly the turnaround time is going to be for that?
So I guess it depends on when you registered. So we had over, you know, almost 400 people register for this program, and we actually sold out of our, sold out of our outreach materials. So we have a second printing that's happened, and it should be shipped, I think, today or tomorrow. Great. So within the next, if you weren't in the first batch, the first wave of mailings, you'll be in the second wave of mailings.
Thank you.
And Megan asked if we're putting up information on the trees, like so people are able to provide information. I'll share my screen here. This is a sign. It's been modified for CCE Yates. Can you see the sign?
Yes.
Yeah. So prior to the CCE Yates, it was SUNY Brockport's logo, because SUNY Brockport was the one that actually created this. Here is the information that is printed. I don't think I have one. Oh, yes, I do. So you can see in my office, it's quite large. You can print them smaller. It's just that it was actually cheaper for me to print it on campus. This is a laminated foam board. So this will go on the tree and provides information to people about SLF. There we go. Yeah, so this is, I can give you this file and then you can just change out your logo. I don't think they're terribly expensive to print for us on campus. The issue is mailing something that size, because there's really nothing, you know, there's no package you can go into. You have to actually like Christmas wrap it.
Hey, Hilary, this is Lindsay with CLWA. Those files, is there an easy place to find those, or will you send them out, the PDFs of those? Because we would love to put things like in our newsletters and include them in publications we already have going out to the public, just to maximize reach.
Sure.
Or articles that you guys have drafted. I think, speaking for some of the lake associations, like we're always happy to include that stuff in our outreach efforts. So if there's already materials that are produced, like that would be super easy to just include it in current mailings.
We do have a lot of information on our Finger Lakes Invasives website. I can find it. Let's see if I can share. I believe we have, let me just look here. If we don't have the PDF on our website, then we will. So, okay. So you should be seeing, this is the fingerlakesinvasives.org/spotted lanternfly website. It's got information on, if you see it, you know, take a picture and give it to the spotted lanternfly at ag.newyork. So here are some pictures of the resources that we have, along with information that Matt has put together from Penn State and other locations. And then here are, we can add the PDF so that you can just make these.
That'd be great. Cool.
Yeah. Along with, we can maybe put a zip file in here to do, you know, here are some Twitter appropriate, you know, information, because we have a lot of, you know, Matt's been putting together a lot of posts, so he could put together just a folder of posts that everyone can just share out about spotted lanternfly. There's also on the Ag and Markets website, they have these great, these are really great. traps here. Okay. Do you see that pink mean or no?
No.
All right. How about now?
Yep. There you go.
So that is, I mean, that's perfect for right now. We'll be hanging around all fall. If you spot us, report us, right? That's really good. Here again is now's the time to spot spotted lanternfly. So they have these kind of phenological social media assets that they've created. We can share these out too. These are great. I mean, if we can just share these out, there's nothing better than having something else somebody else made that you can just share. That's my favorite kind of social media right there. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I know that the folks in Canada that I was speaking with, they're looking at doing a Don't Move Firewood campaign. I think there's social media assets out there. On the next SLF working group, I'm going to ask for they have a box folder with pictures and these assets and everything. If we can find a way to make that more shareable, because I know, Lindsay, getting it to the Lake Association members is critical. And, if we can provide canned content for you, that would be great. I would love it if everyone had the poster just put in the newsletter. I know that NYSFOLA is putting it into their Waterworks newsletter that goes to every lake association in New York. So hopefully that will draw some attention. But any way that we can do it, we're happy to provide that conduit to do it.
Yeah, these are great. Thanks for being willing to share.
Yeah, anytime. This is great. Yes. And please just email me if you're wanting to set up some traps. Mary, I'm working with Livonia Central School District. They have an environmental science class. I went out there in basic species mapping and gave him a trap. He's going to be working with his students to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
How close do you set the traps up together?
Well, I would think you wouldn't want them too close together, but let me see if I can find some information for you.
I mean, I've got 33 acres. How many traps do I set up?
So you're going to want to be strategic in your placement. And so where would spotted lanternfly first likely be? It's going to hitchhike from your car. It's going to be likely in, close to disturbed areas. So you're not going to be putting it internally to your forest. You're going to be putting it on the edge effect, or closest to where you'd expect them to hitchhike. And
well, the problem is that I'm on the hill that is above Frito-Lay, where they were found in Conklin.
Okay.
So and that's not the way I drive into my property.
Sure.
So it's on either side of the property.
Yeah, you'd have to show me a map because I'm not really seeing that. But if you just shoot me your address in the text, and I can I'll look it up.
Okay. Good enough.
Probably look at either red maple, silver maple on your property, wild grapevine, or near those types of host trees.
Okay.
Yeah. And Brian said, I've asked, should we putting it on black walnut? Because that's a very strong host. Should we put it on grape? That's a very strong host. And he said, if we only have a couple traps, which, Barbara, if you have that many acres, you're only going to have a couple traps probably, finding tree of heaven first, they're going to be associated with tree of heaven at some point in their life cycle. And so you're more likely to have that catch. But say you don't have any, then, okay, black walnut, grape, your maples that Linda was talking about.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll send you my address. You can Google map it.
Great.
Or
yep.
So
yeah, let's try to get that because you're right in the thick of it.
Yep.
And all the survey can we'll just do our best, you know, and that's
Hey.
here. We're all going to be doing our best to try to, you know, stay in front of it. But with all these people having this information, I have to think that we're going to make a positive impact with all of our networks and all of our collective resources.
Have we thought about reaching out to auto mechanics? Like the people that are actually looking at the underside of cars all the time?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Think about those people that aren't in the room that might be really good resources.
So we're coming up with a communications plan. The actual Northeast IPM, Nancy Cusomo, sorry for your last name. She's gathering a subgroup, and we're looking at targeted audiences. And so we haven't quite created that list of targeted audiences, but, you know, yeah, maybe that's exactly who we, you know, reach out to. I know the trucking industry has been identified as, you know, people that we should reach out to. I know here in the Finger Lakes, we, you know, they're on my whiteboard. Matt and I were doing some brainstorming on, you know, where it is we need to address, you know, Finger Lakes Museum, the Cuba Nature Center, Cumming Nature Center, all of these different areas, but then zoos and college magazines and, you know, getting college students to be aware of this bug because they might be outside roaming around too. How do we reach these people in a positive, you know, you got one or two shots.
Hilary, I'm still kind of wondering how, and Linda talked about this, I think, while you were gone, how do we engage our municipal officials so that when we, I hope we never have to, but when the time comes that we need to do some type of rapid response, how do we have them already engaged so we aren't fighting an uphill battle when we've got the battle in front of us?
Yeah, I am putting a lot of stock into that communications plan in that I think it will create a workflow that will be very beneficial to the municipal officials in the area. And I think what we need is a one-page talking points about SLF to municipal officials. What it is, what the impact, potential impact, you know, conservative, what's the liberal estimate of an impact to this area, you know, why we should care. And then, you know, if we find it, these are the steps that we'll need to take. And then we need an ask from them. And so it's great that we keep them informed, but what do we need them to do? And I think that that's the piece that we need to sit down and say, what is it that we need them to do? We need addresses from everybody. We need a press release or a press conference from you. We need you to talk at your emergency management meetings. You know, we actually need something from you, not just here's an invasive, be on the lookout. Like, we need to have an ask, and we need to make sure that that ask is concise and succinct, but doable. And then they can't say no.
And that's tough because, you know, they don't have this in the budget to respond.
Right.
You know, they don't plan for this kind of stuff. We saw this with EAB, and, you know, you inform, and then like, well, we don't see it yet. It's not here yet. You know, so they really didn't make a plan for it.
Right. Well, you know,
now they're dealing with the consequences.
The thing is, you know, counties like Seneca, counties like Tompkins, counties with significant wineries where their constituents are vineyard owners or you know, brewery owners, they're going to have to listen because it's too big of an impact not to. And they'll get, you know, run out of office if people think that they weren't doing enough. And so if the ask is a lower cost ask, you know, or tiered approach, I think that would be beneficial because out of 17 counties, the municipals are going to be different in each county. They just are based on what is going on. Okay, so it's just about 12 o'clock. I think that we can, any other questions? You know, happy to have another meeting if you think that that would be helpful. Check out our website here. And, you know, I think that this is just one of many conversations that we'll need to have about spotted lanternfly. So let's start with the traps. Let's get the messaging. If there's other materials that you think you'll need, we're hoping to invest in stickers. We're hoping to invest in billboards, especially coming up that corridors, those corridors. So some right in Linda and Liz's neck of the woods, Corning, we need to probably get Bath. We probably need to get, you know, so really investing some billboard messaging into this is going to be important as well. And send me an email if you didn't get your resources. If you need more, happy to provide more. If you want a workshop, you know, how can we move together and all work on the same thing? And if we can get this communication plan up and going before the new year, we'll send a link to that as well.
Hilary, I want to say thank you for all the time and effort and energy you put into getting this organized. This was exceptional and you shouldered a lot of the burden. So thank you for all that you did. It's much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate that. Thank you all. Actually.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are here. So it's really you that are phenomenal. I appreciate it.
Thank you for all of the information.
Yeah,
I'm in the process of typing you an email right now.
I look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.
Hi, Maureen. Good to see you. I saw you register. Give me a little smile.
Opening up here. Yeah, it's good to see people.
Yeah, I think this is the end.
Nice job.
Oh, thank you, Christina. I appreciate it. So send me an email. Let's continue this conversation. I think there's a lot that we can do, but I think we're all, you know, armed with as much information as we can have at this point to know that, you know, the wave is coming, but we're doing something about it.
I was really disappointed in the last breakout room I was in. Folks in Ontario are trying to go to wineries and talk, and the winery people aren't interested. And I am just beyond shocked about that.
Yeah.
It's so disappointing that we have the means to do something preventative and the people that are most vulnerable are not getting it. Like, what's the psychology behind that? I don't understand.
So I don't know if you've seen some of the materials that have been created. I probably have some around here, but they have coasters, and some of the coasters are great. But one of the coasters in particular is a coaster of a wine bottle with the SLF's back end in the bottle, and it's like crawling out. Okay. And so it doesn't really paint the best picture of like what's in my wine. Are bugs in my wine? Right? So,
okay, so the products then.
Yeah, so you know, you've got one shot at messaging.
Yeah.
And you don't get the messaging right. And wineries are uber sensitive to their own messaging, because it could take one bad review to just shut down the tasting room, all of it. So they have a different push point than the rest of us. We're thinking like, of course, why wouldn't they want to? And this is fabulous. Oh my gosh, whatever. Why aren't you on board? And for them, they're like, this could take out my family for a season. You know, I can.
Yeah. So I guess they don't really have to distribute those to the public, though. It's more about their business, right?
Yeah, could be. So our materials, I want to be distributed at the wineries. Like these are door tags, but we have wine tags that I want to put over, you know, they'll go over like this, you know, a wine bottle. So I'm hoping that not only the wineries, but people who go to the wineries get the information.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
You throw everything at it, Maureen. See
All
what's-
right, I know. Well, I sent you a couple of emails, so, you know, you could check those out and let me know what I can do.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's wonderful. You get some master naturalist hours.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Gio. Hey, Liz.
Hey, how's it going?
We have people for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the Speedies Fest. I gotta send you an email.
Yep, I know. I was like, I saw Linda on here too, so I'm heading over to the park after this to get the passes and get everything coordinated for the weekend.
Oh, great.
Thanks.
Christina brought up a really good point in the message earlier. She said, do we have volunteers? And she has some she could potentially utilize to walk around the park and check for the vehicles for spotted lanternfly.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, like, I can reach out to our network and see who's available, but I think that some people might be interested in helping with that.
Yeah, if you could reach out, and if there were some people that were available any of those days that we could just, they could check the vendors, I think would be important. And then obviously all the cars that are going to be parking in the
Yeah,
park.
because like I see all those trailers out there and they're coming from everywhere.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like even like as people are coming in and they're getting their tickets, to have somebody in a vest that's just checking under the trucks coming in would be handy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I imagine any volunteers we recruit would need like a crash course, something probably a third of the length of what this section was. This was super informative, and I learned a lot more than I had already learned about lanternfly. But yeah, like some kind of crash course for volunteers, you know, and some kind of swag or something to show that they're not poking around under people's vehicles with bad intentions.
Christina, I have all of these door tags you could put under their windshield.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Oh, definitely.
I am not in town this weekend, but I have a whole army of community gardeners that might be interested in helping.
So I could send these, because we have people coming. So actually, Liz, I'm going to send all the stuff with them instead of mailing it to you. And if we can, you know, get these door tags and just put them under the windshield wipers. So our folks are tabling, so you would just get it from them, or have your volunteers ask for some of these door tags to put on people's cars as they inspect.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go home with a message.
Good idea.
Yeah. So
yeah, Liz.
Problem though is most people are going to be parking at SUNY Broome and shuttling over.
Mm.
Yeah, SUNY Broome is utilized for parking as well.
yeah, well, I'll bring the materials.
But as far as the vendors,
and then you guys can figure out whether if it's workable, great. If it's not, then they'll just bring the materials back. But at least you have the capacity to do it.
Hilary, are you coming down?
No.
Or who is coming down from? Is there someone from PRISM coming down?
Yeah, so there's 2 people coming. Let me just get my email. 2 people on Friday. I think Matt's not on here anymore. So 2 people on Friday. Eric is going to be there on Sunday. And I think Matt is going to be there on Saturday.
Okay. If you could just send me their names, because I'm going to go over to the park today to get the vendor passes for anyone that's going to be coming to the park.
Yes, great. As soon as we're done with this, I'll confirm and then send over the names.
Okay, yeah, you send me those and then I'll send you my cell phone number, so if there's any issues, they can just call me.
That'd be great. Great. I think we're good, right?
All right, thanks.
Being on and all the information you guys provided and you know, brainstorming and how to get more people. I think that's exactly what an in-person meeting would be doing, but we were able to reach far more people with this, so it's awesome. All right.
Thanks,
Great.
folks.
All right.
We'll talk soon, Hilary.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.